Welcome everyone to the Ventura County Climate Emergency Council. This meeting is being held on November 23rd. We're just waiting another moment or two while we have the last few council members join us. I've got our council members marked when I find them as noted as being VCCEC after their name, except for our chair, who's got chair next to hers. And we have Sue Hughes here that's going to be helping me by taking notes during the meeting and also making sure I don't miss stuff. And then Alejandro Taez is going to join us a little bit later as well.
As we wait for a few more members, do we need one more in order to reach quorum?
No, we've got a quorum right now with 6 out of 10. So
Okay.
That's all we're required is a simple majority. So we do have a quorum that it is here. So we can get started. And as I have it, we're at 12:05. So if you would like to call the meeting to order, you're welcome to do that, Chair Schnapp.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that. So calling the Ventura County Climate Emergency Council regular meeting to order today here on Tuesday, November 23rd, 2021 at 12:05. This meeting will be conducted via Zoom and telephonically. And as special notice, this is in response to the declared state and local emergencies due to the novel coronavirus and limited public access to the Hall of Administration. It's consistent with the governor's executive orders of N-29-20. This Ventura County Climate Emergency Council meeting will be conducted via Zoom and telephonically. And let's go ahead and have a roll call, please.
All right. Councilmember White.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Ferris.
Here.
Thank you. Chair Schnapp.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Kessley.
Here.
Councilmember Ramirez. Councilmember Ontiveros.
I'm here.
Thank you. Councilmember Garola.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Hernandez. Councilmember Chavez. And Councilmember Baldwin. With that, we have 6 members present. We have 4 absent. And I was told ahead of time about 2 of those absences. So it could be that we have the other ones join late. And if we do, we'll note that in the minutes. But with that, we can proceed. We do have a quorum in attendance.
Okay, thank you, Clay. Let's go ahead and move to item number 3, the Pledge of Allegiance. So please join me in the pledge. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so let's move on to item number 4, the approval of minutes from our October 26th, 2021 Climate Emergency Council meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
I motion to approve.
Okay, so Councilmember Ontiveros moves to approve. Is there a second? Maggie?
I'll second.
Okay. Maggie did, seconded by Maggie Kessley. All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go back to a roll call. Thank you.
No problem. Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember Ferris,
Aye.
Chair Schnapp,
Aye.
Councilmember Kesley,
Aye.
Councilmember Ontiveros.
Yes.
Thank you. And Councilmember Garola.
Aye.
Thank you. And that passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item number 5 is the public comments for items not on the agenda. So this is where we have an opportunity for the general public to make comments on items not on the agenda. We'll go ahead and see if we have anybody who's either online or if anyone has sent anything in. Is there anybody online that would like to speak? You can raise your hand. You could take yourself off of mute if you'd like. And currently, I do see that we have a few members from the general public attending, but I don't necessarily see any hands raised or anybody off mute. Okay. Well, Clay, did we have any members of the general public send us?
We received no comments from the public.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so if there's members from the public who would like to speak during a time for an issue on the agenda, you'll be given that time. So let's move on then to correspondence agenda, and this takes care of items 6 through 9. And so Clay, do you want to walk us through those items?
Right. So for correspondence agenda, your council is not required to bring these up, talk about them, or discuss them. But each of them were just various pieces of correspondence that were distributed to the council that all came from Councilmember Baldwin this month. And just for making sure that the public had access to them, we went ahead and sent these items. Most of them were just FYIs on articles or potential training and education opportunities.
Okay, thank you. And then moving, are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, then let's move on to the regular agenda items here, and let's step into item number 10, subsequent resolution of authorizing the remote teleconference meetings of the Ventura County Climate Emergency Council for a 30-day period pursuant to the Government Code Section 54953, Subdivision E of the Ralph M. Brown Act. So go ahead, Clay.
So this is a subsequent resolution that is similar to the one that was approved last month. So committees and boards throughout the state are doing this exact kind of a resolution. And basically what it does is it allows us to continue having these remote teleconference meetings under certain conditions of the Brown Act. And so that's what that resolution represents that was distributed in your board packet. And if you'd like to discuss it, we can. It's also available to you to go ahead and make a motion if you choose to.
Okay. Are there any discussions from the council? Any questions? Okay. So are there any, do we go through a public comment just to make sure that there is someone?
We can.
who-
That's a great question. We can certainly offer and ask if any of the members of the public have a question
Okay.
or a comment.
Okay. So does anyone from the public want to make a comment or have any questions about item number 10? All right, seeing no comments then from the public, so I'll entertain a motion. All right, so it looks like Keith, are you making a motion to approve?
Right. I'll move to approve a resolution as indicated in the agenda there.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. So motion's been made and seconded, and can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember White,
Yes.
Councilmember Ferris,
Yes.
Chair Schnapp,
Yes.
Councilmember Ontiveros,
Yes.
Councilmember Kesley,
Yes.
Councilmember Garola.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes unanimously.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's move on then to item number 11, update from the County Executive Office. made by staff. So go ahead, Clay.
All right, so this one is relatively short this week or this month. So one, there had been some comments from the public as well as a couple of the council members that we were really interested in having those recordings made available. The suggestion was made that we look into using YouTube rather than hosting on the prime.gov sort of platform that a number of other committees or other organizations use, and YouTube worked just fine. And so now if you go to the Climate Emergency Council webpage, which is at ventura.org/VCCEC, and then you click the subpage for agendas, there's a link right on there towards the top that lets you get into those recordings. And so now we'll be recording and posting these as we move forward. And if we need to change away from hosting on a YouTube channel, we can do that. But for now, it's pretty easy, which means the turnaround time is very quick for the public. We're able to post those. So, and although these recordings are sometimes long, that the file size is not shown to be a problem. So that's good news. But we haven't had any further movement on the website redesign for the Sustainability Committee. So when we have our Sustainability Division. So when that happens, we'll let you know when there's something available to the public that you all be able to see. And then the last thing, I just wanted to do a quick report out on the various TACs that met and convened. Obviously, we have a few more agenda items on that. So the Evaluation Criteria TAC held meetings on October 29th and November 12th. The Transportation TAC met November 4th and also on November 18th. And then I don't believe the Agriculture TAC has met this past month. The Other Issues TAC met, I believe, also on the 18th. So that is it for my update, unless there are questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council members? All right, and then are there any questions from the general public or comments? Oh, okay. So council member Ontiveros.
I do have a question. I'm always a little slow on the uptake. Sorry about that. So the YouTube, is it a channel or is it a link or what is it?
That's a good question. So the way that YouTube would work is that we have it hosted through a linked kind of Gmail account. And so it's on YouTube. That's where the recordings are hosted. But for most people, the easiest place to find them is going to be, rather than combing through YouTube to do that, is going to be to just go to our Ventura County Climate Emergency Council website and access it as if they were looking for any of the other things related to our agenda items, whether that's an agenda, the packet, or now the recordings.
Will that link be on regular correspondence or the agenda, or a way anybody can look at any of the agendas and say, here's a link to that recording?
I wasn't planning on having that available, in part because the agenda comes out before the recording's available.
Oh, okay.
So,
but maybe for the past one, maybe for the minutes, I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking how we can ensure that the public has access to it.
In my experience, I think that this will probably serve. If we get reports that people do have trouble accessing it, I would be happy to consider that. But for right now, it might be somewhat confusing to do those. And if they can find the agenda and they can find the agenda packet, they should be able to find the link because it's in the same place.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you for your work.
A good question. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for staff? And questions from the public or comments? Okay, well, thank you, Clay. Let's move on then to item number 12, the evaluation criteria TAC and recommended procedures for vetting of policy and subprogram proposals to this Climate Emergency Council. So take it away.
Thank you. So if Councilmember Kessley or Councilmember Ferris would like to kick this off, they are absolutely welcome to. Otherwise, I'm happy to tell the rest of the group what good work you've been doing over the last month. So how would you two like to start?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and we'll chime in.
Okay. Sounds good. So the evaluation criteria TAC met frankly, just a few days after the last meeting that we had. They had their first meeting and got started and had what I think were a couple of very strong conversations about the evaluation criteria, what they can do for the council. And so a memorandum was submitted to the rest of the council based on the work and the discussions that they had on what we think, or what council members Kessley and Ferris think are a good starting point in creating that consistency for proposals that come to the Ventura County Climate Emergency Council. And it's really based on a couple of what I would say are pillars of thinking on this. And so the first one would be, what is the impact in general? Do we expect this to be something that is relatively low or high impact? And there's a bit of a cost analysis in there to say, is it also, if we say that cost represents finite resources, is there low or high impact for the costs that we have involved too? And these are all general. We don't expect these necessarily to all come in the first time they're proposed fully vetted. But we do use basic criteria where we ask people to characterize things as low, medium, or high and provide definitions for those, for each of those basic criteria. And then the next criteria outcome or pillar would be related to feasibility. The idea or the concept that how likely is it that this can be implemented fully, or that this could be implemented at all and in a timely fashion to get the outcomes that we anticipate. So that was those feasibility criteria, and there are a number of sub-criteria to those. And then the last one is related to co-benefits. So not just looking at GHG reductions, although that is primarily what we're doing, that is the main area of impact. But obviously some of these programs are going to have co-benefits for things like whether that is going to be recreation and public access, whether that is going to be shade and urban heat mitigation, whether that is going to be something like a water quality benefit, any number of other co-benefits. And so taking those into account and really thinking about them. And so the memo that Council members Kessley and Ferris have provided provides a list of those and a way of characterizing those. And so when you look at those three pillars of impact, feasibility, and co-benefits, then you can get an idea of, is this something that's in the right direction that the Climate Emergency Council would be capable of saying, yes, this is ready to go to the Board of Supervisors and has a consistent way of looking at it. And in most cases, it also states that to say a general characterization, is this, for example, low, medium, or high feasibility in this or that area? And what is the rationale for that? So not just saying it, but stating what the rationale is, providing sources or documentation as needed. So, but it should give a framework or a pathway for people that want to create that proposal so they have a target to work towards. Council members Kessley or Ferris, would you like to add anything?
Sure, I'm happy to go through this, and thanks, Clay, because I think that was a really good synopsis of what we had discussed during our TAC meetings. And one of the things that really came up as a rationale for kind of presenting it in this fashion was that there are a number of programs that we as a council are going to be researching, and they all have different nuances to them, and some may be more effective than others. And how do we put that together in a way that's consistent for us as a council to evaluate whether it's worthwhile to forward to the board, and whether as the board, they could understand quickly what our recommendation is and what the background material is to support that. And so that's why when we came up with the three main criteria is that if you have a proposal or a program and the board was able to implement it, how impactful would it be in reducing greenhouse gases? Does it have a low impact, medium impact, or high impact to do that? And underneath each of them are then sub-criteria, which allow us to understand how we came up with that understanding. What do we expect the actual reduction to be? Did we quantify it in some way? How fast do we believe that it'll actually achieve its goals? Is it slow in achieving the reductions or relatively quick in rate of delivery? What is the actual cost associated with it? And if you put more money behind it, would you actually get good reduction for every dollar that you put into that program? And future scenario reductions as well. So is this a program that will reduce greenhouse gases over and above what we're already expecting from natural economic movements or federal reduction programs or state reduction programs? So is it actually impactful in achieving our overall county goals? And then in feasibility, we sort of understood, look, if the program's good and has its good intentions, and if we implemented it would do well, but is it even feasible to implement? Are there community or political issues that would cause problems with people even wanting to be able to pursue this? Does the county have a significant degree of influence of actually implementing the program so that if approved, it could actually go forward? Operationally, is it even feasible? Does the technology exist, or is it something that someone had just posted preliminary results in a laboratory? Or logistically, could you even put it into practice? And financial feasibility is whether we have the money or we can find the sources of funding to do that. And then the third one is the co-benefits, which were that depending on the program itself, those two really focus on the effort to reduce greenhouse gases, but there may be other benefits, other public benefits that are associated with the program that actually meet other goals that the county has in line. We want to make sure that we're at least evaluating that and calling that out. So we thought if we focus and ask every TAC that's looking at every program to make sure that we're asking these questions and being able to put some rationale behind them, it gives us a consistent way to forward that to the board, making it easier for them. Since I think that in my mind, this is what the council is intended to do, is help the board make these decisions. So that was my thoughts on it. Councilmember Kessley.
Thank you, Councilmember Ferris. You summed it up quite nicely, and it was a pleasure to work with Clay and Councilmember Ferris on this. It was a great learning experience and a lot of great discussions. And I do believe what we're presenting today is a really good way to be able to provide the Board of Supervisors with well thought out programs that they could actually say, this is high feasibility. We could actually make this happen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Council Members Ferris and Kessley. This sounds like a dynamic way of allowing then the tax to move forward, but with some framework, giving us the tools that we need to look at, as well as how could we apply these various guideposts in terms of criteria and all. Are there any questions or comments from other council members? So I see Councilmember Ontiveros, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, sounds great. Good work. But I just wanted to know if there's a rubric. Will you be sharing, or will we be sharing some kind of rubric with the other tax so that we can follow that guideline as we move forward in our conversations with each other in our individual tax?
When you say a rubric, in addition to what's in the memo, what would you be looking for?
You know what? I did not see the memo. So is it there?
Okay.
I'm thinking of just a little, like a little table with these are the, I don't know. I looked through the whole agenda.
I would be happy to do a screen share and kind of do a
Yes.
scroll through
Yeah,
and see if it's
why don't
fulfilling
you
kind of
do
what you
that?
vision.
Yeah,
Not to
'cause
mention that may
uh-huh.
help other members of the public that are here too.
Yeah, because I kind of went, what? I didn't see that.
Okay, no problem. Let me go ahead and do that, and I'll do. I'll kind of scroll through it, stop on the criteria and sub-criteria, and then kind of explain what we've got. Council members Kessley and Ferris, please feel free to add things, particularly when I miss stuff. So let's see here. Okay, so what we should see here at this point is just page 1 of the memo, which for the, I don't have the agenda packet, so I'm not sure which page out of the entire packet this is, but it would be under, basically, if you can find the cover sheet for agenda item 12, it'd be under there. And so just, it's a single page statement. And then we get into what I was referring to that first pillar, but what we really call the criteria 1 or impact outcome. And so this is intended as a roll up of the sub criteria. And you can see one of the things we hear, and I think this is where we're getting closer to the rubric as you described it, Councilmember Ontiveros, where we do say, is this generally, and could you characterize it generally as low, medium, or high? And then it's got a definition for each of those. And it also, one of the things that I pointed out before, and I would say again, is it does say that the response should both characterize the proposal as low, medium, or high, and then provide a rationale for why that kind of summation was arrived at. And as we look at the sub-criteria, you get this like sub-criteria 1A, sub-criteria 1B. And so we have here anticipated reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So that one would think would be a relatively straightforward one. What do we actually expect to see in those GHG emissions? And it's giving that in the form of a question. What question are we really asking? As well as what do we expect that response to include? And so that's what we see in this column here. And I was just informed, thank you, Sue Hughes, that it's on page 34 of the agenda packet. So then, and we see that same format going through each of our subcriteria as we go through these. So for example, rate of delivery is really talking about rate at which something is adopted, deployed, or delivered. When we think about this as a service or a deliverable, something that is resulting in GHG reductions. And so we're looking at what do we expect? How much do we expect that to get into the community? Still under that impact criteria, anticipated costs. So that is pretty much just what we expect. What do we expect this kind of delivery to cost the county? And then as we look at it to give a evaluation to what does that cost mean to us, then we would compare it to the GHG reductions that we would anticipate. And so you get costs per GHG reduction, or you could do GHG reduction per dollar. So depending on how you would want to look at that. And then the final one for those, as Councilmember Ferris had mentioned, would be future scenario reductions. And that's really asking the question is, are these reductions that are contemplated in this proposal unique and kind of untapped for what we see for future scenarios from state actions, from federal actions, perhaps other local jurisdictions, or wherever those might come from? Or do we think that these are something that we need to address from a county perspective? So it's really doing a redundancy check. Then we get into the next major criteria, which is our implementation feasibility. And those are posed here as outcomes. And so again, this is a roll-up of all the sub-criteria that follow it. But again, in that low, medium, and high characterization, we get into defining and talking about what does low, medium, high mean to us when we think about it with respect to these implementation criteria. And then we get into the sub-criteria for those. And again, as these roll up, you should be able to think about these in that same way. Community feasibility. So how feasible is that for community adoption, community acceptance, and likelihood of supporting this measure? And you can see this one has through here a number of items and then sub-questions that ask other sorts of questions related to community feasibility. So not just limited to a single question, but different lenses of community feasibility. In particular, some of these sub-questions ask things about land use compatibility and designated disadvantaged communities. Again, another feasibility aspect would be the next sub-criteria, which is degree of influence. How much influence can the county as a jurisdiction, the Board of Supervisors specifically, have on that delivery, that adoption, deployment, and doing these things? If we're talking about purchasing, procurement, purchase of vehicles, those things would be examples of things over which the county has direct control. If it's something that is behavior change related, the county can influence it, but it may not have as much direct influence because it's asking people to do it. It can't compel them in some of those circumstances. Then we get into some other lenses of feasibility. And so the group put forward these questions that ask about operational feasibility. For example, does the technology exist? Is the technology readily available, even if it does exist? Those sorts of things. And then how many users need to adopt this? Is it lots of users or just a couple of users? So that might be something to consider. And then financial feasibility has more to do with funding availability and the mechanisms and how much we know about it. So if we don't really know anything, and we don't know the degree to which it might or might not be feasible, but if we know that there are state funds out there and they're looking for jurisdictions shaped just like the County of Ventura to implement these things, then we could say that that probably improves the feasibility because somebody else has the funds and we might be able to tap into those. And then we get into the last of the major criteria, which is the co-benefit outcomes. And this one's a little different. And then instead of kind of sub-criteria and multiple of them, it's really a listing of multiple types of criteria. But it does use that low, medium, and high ranking and provides a couple of definitions on how to characterize those in general. But then the sub-criteria are really a listing of various co-benefits. And I would say that from my recollection in our conversations with myself and council members Kessley and Ferris, we understood that these are probably not the only co-benefits that someone could make an argument for. We don't expect them to be, but these did come from the GHG handbook that's still in draft form that the Sacramento Air Quality District had proposed, and we thought this was a pretty good one. If you recall, that that is an update to the CAPCOA GHG mitigation measures handbook that was published in 2010. So it seems like it's coming from a place that's trying to do the sorts of things that we're hoping to do. And so here you see the last of those co-benefits that are listed, including things like VMT reductions, water conservation, pedestrian and traffic safety, healthy communities, and those sorts of things. So that's the last of the items that I have. Council members Kessley or Ferris, are there anywhere that you'd like me to navigate to or anything you'd like to add?
Nothing to navigate to, but I did want to kind of give one additional element of context for this, is that there are always, for any one of these programs that we're evaluating for the board, for our own benefit, to understand it as well as the recommendation of the board, there are potentially many questions that we could end up asking for this. We felt that these were the minimum we should be asking, because to make sure, is it going to be effective? What are the things we should think about on its ability, if implemented, to actually reduce GHG reduction? And is it actually feasible? If, for example, if we could find the money and the board is, and it's operationally feasible, but it turns out the community is going to give the board a political problem for putting it in their backyard. They don't want it. Could be low feasibility that it would actually get implemented. So at a minimum, those are the elements that are going to be important for them. There may be more that the individual tax think are important to back up that. So we didn't want to, we wanted to just keep this kind of simple to make sure that there isn't too much that we're asking all the committees to put in here. But we felt that this was a good minimum to make sure that if this were presented, the board would have a good understanding of what the program feasibility and impact could be.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from other council members? Questions or comments? Seeing none, are there any questions or, well, comments from the public? We'll go ahead and give you a moment during the agenda item number 12.
And I wanted to note that it looks like Councilmember Hernandez has joined us too.
Oh, great. Okay. Welcome. So there is a comment on the chat from Don Price. He's saying the agenda packet is only 3 pages. None of the additional material has been made public.
I don't believe that's accurate, but I can go and do a test right now.
I know that the agenda is 3 pages long, but the agenda packet is 99 pages long.
It does appear that the member of the public is correct. It looks like the wrong link was attached to that. So I'm not sure that we could take a motion on this item since it hasn't been released to all the members of the public, but the council can still deliberate on that and we could address it in the next meeting available. And I can fix the link in the interim to make sure that if anyone does investigate into it, that it's available.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Don, for bringing that to our attention. With regards to Councilmember Ferris, you had mentioned that this was a minimum to consider. I like that idea. I think that you have given us a framework. You and Councilmember Kessley have really given us a great framework to actually then start applying to the tax. Really appreciate your hard effort to get to this point of presenting. Thank you. And then I see that there's another comment in the chat from public member Kathleen Wheeler. How confident are council members that they have sufficient technical expertise available to gauge the number of GHG reduction?
I don't know who that would be for, but I guess this is Clay. What would the tax or any additional committees that are investigating the proposals be able to have as resources to be able to come up with that range of quantification, right? Because we're asking for that, and we probably need a little bit more professional expertise to help come up with that, right?
So what I would expect is that there would be some reasonable assumptions made. There would be citation of appropriate sources, and that staff would assist with that. If there's additional technical expertise needed to be able to make these sorts of proposals, then staff could look into that and potentially basically find those resources and make sure they're available to fulfill the needs of this council. But right now, we don't have anything clear enough that we would be able to provide anything such as technical consulting services or those sorts of things. So the proposals need to occur before we can consider mobilizing those sorts of resources. And one of the things that we're going to be creating and making available in the future is doing our own GHG monitoring and monitoring tool. And so we can use some of the quantification figures that we're going to be relying on for those sorts of reporting and tracking activities to aid in what we're doing here. And like I mentioned before, when we pulled the co-benefits from something like the GHG handbook that we find from one of the air quality districts, those are the sorts of resources that we can reliably count on, because that is exactly what they're made for, and made for these sorts of things. So that's what I would say on reliability is where you find it. And so there's going to have some legwork that's going to need to be done to do that. And I don't know that it will be easy or available for every question that is proposed or every proposal that is posed, but for a number of them, it will be, particularly when we find things like case studies and those sorts of things to rely on.
And then to point out too, all sources would be presented with each tax presentation, so that everybody would have access to know where those sources came from and whether or not those are all reliable resources. And that way, I think we can make sure and ensure that we're getting good information.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from the council, from the public? Okay, great. So then because the agenda link to the agenda packet was mistaken, we will then, instead of, let me see if I can see what 12. Okay, so it was recommended procedures. There's no real motion for this item.
What had been proposed was that the board could, or the council could, choose to adopt these as procedures moving forward. You can also just have this as an agreement that it's fine as currently written and choose to use it moving forward. You don't necessarily have to adopt it. It's not changing your bylaws or any those sorts of things. Alternatively, if you'd like to see this on the agenda again at your next meeting, then this can be there as in that form for it to be kind of officially agreed upon by your members. But I would say that without having made the memo itself available to the public, we would not be available to have the council vote on it at this time. But I have just adjusted the link on that webpage and where the agenda is located, and so that should be available to the public at this time.
Okay. So we can actually adopt or agree that this would be the starting point for the tax and let it be made known that way. Is that okay? And then do we have to bring it back to the next meeting, or can we just agree that this is the framework we're going to use? Clay, I guess that was a question for you.
Okay, so as far as I'm concerned, if there is a general consensus amongst the council members that these seem like appropriate procedures, I would say hang on to it. Maybe consider printing it out and put it in each of your handbooks if you have them. I can also take this memo and post it as a separate PDF so it's not buried in the agenda packet. And I can put it on the resources page for your council if you would like me to make that easier. I know that if one, it wasn't posted properly, and that would be my fault as far as part of our public distribution. Well, I apologize for that, but we can make sure that's more findable in the future. Not to mention if one of our council members was in the packet and still managed to accidentally navigate past it, it's fair because there are 99 pages in there. There's a lot to look over. So I can pull that out, make it separate. And then if we decide to update it, change it at any time, then that can always be swapped out. Would that be something that the council members here would be supportive of?
Okay, so I see nodding heads saying yes.
I support.
Okay,
Cool. All right, then as far as staff is concerned, that's clear enough with me for us to move forward with this, to go ahead, and I would be happy to publish this so that anybody can find it pretty easily. But if at any point this council wants to discuss it further, consider revising how we look at things, then that's always available for further discussion. So they're really guidelines.
okay, very good. I saw another chat from a community member. Kathleen Wheeler says, as a member of the public and interested observer of your progress, I am excited about the evaluation criteria tax work. All right, thank you.
Great.
Okay, so then let's go ahead and move to item number 13, receive and file a presentation on the fiscal year 2021-22 budget and staffing plan for Climate Action Plan CAP implementation. So go ahead, Clay.
All right, give me one moment and I will get this queued up. Okay. Okay, so just a few weeks ago, this item was taken to the Board of Supervisors. This is for implementation of General Plan Program COSDD, which I'll talk about in a little more detail in a couple of slides. But what we did is myself and a team from our finance team here in the County Executive Office worked together, worked across a number of agencies to bring this budget and staffing plan forward to the Board of Supervisors. And obviously it's related to what you are doing, because this is really reflective of the boots on the ground, what we're doing related to implementation of the Climate Action Plan. And this council is obviously a part of that. And it's a unique part of that. So first, the program itself. So you would find this in the conservation and open space element of the general plan. And it says the CEO shall, within 6 months from the adoption of the general plan update and climate action plan, present to the Board of Supervisors proposed budget and staffing plan, including qualified technical consultants, to implement the climate action plan, and shall update the budget and staffing plan each year. So the budget and staffing plan was brought forward to the Board of Supervisors. It was presented, and it was presented with the costs, the expected allocations of staffing resources, and the assumptions that went into developing all of those resources on what would be needed, including one-time resources, which typically reflect consultant costs, where we're going to need to bring in outside expertise to do work, as well as any additional staffing that we would need to do or change for this fiscal year. And one of the things I want to point out is that this was really designed as a bridge into the annual budgeting process. So this is not a one-off, but as the slide says, this is going to happen each year, and it's going to be part of the budget process moving forward. So there were a few milestones that I also wanted to point out for this on the important way of getting here and some of the things that were included along the way. So there was a fiscal analysis that was requested by the Board of Supervisors as part of the general plan update project back in August of 2019. Then after that research was done, working across multiple agencies and analyzing the draft 2040 general plan, then that fiscal analysis was presented to the board. Then a couple of months later, we went through the adoption hearings, we went through a few more processes, and the general plan itself, including the climate action plan, was adopted by the Board of Supervisors. This last October, there was kind of an additional milestone that was added to that, and that was the board requesting additional information and giving direction to staff related to a couple of specific general plan implementation programs related to the climate action plan, specifically the development of a REACH code, which is program COSS, and the prohibition of natural gas and certain types of future development. And that would be specifically general plan program has AA. And then in November, earlier this month, we presented this budget and staffing plan for this fiscal year. So one of the things to remember, and what I would say is that the fiscal analysis that was presented to the board in 2020 was a starting point, and it was a really good foundation to have so that we could start this work effort, but it wasn't exactly the same exercise as what we were doing here for this budget and staffing plan. That's why I wanted to point some of this out. So one, it analyzed a draft 2040 general plan. So it's not an exact apples to apples. For example, new programs that came out of the environmental review process were not analyzed in that fiscal analysis. And one of those is even related to this council. So for example, program COSLL that is related to the work that this council does, that came out of the environmental review process. So that wasn't in the draft 2040 general plan. So that and others like it wouldn't have been analyzed. That doesn't mean it was a bad fiscal analysis. It did what it was supposed to do, but it was a different exercise. The other thing that fiscal analysis did is it characterized new and existing programs from a policy standpoint, and that's how it attributed costs. So it looked at things that either was a program that existed or did not exist prior to the general plan update. What we looked at as part of the budget and staffing plan that was presented was costs that the county's agencies are already bearing or costs that are expected as new costs. And that goes for also the staffing and other resource allocations, things that we already have planned for or budgeted and those that we do not. So those are some of what I think were some of the key differences on those items. The other thing, the fiscal analysis looked at and budgeted, or not looked at and budgeted, but looked at and analyzed the first 5 years of implementation and included those related to the CAP, but it did it on a very large scale for the entire general plan. What we did for this budget and staffing plan was we focused just on the 81 programs related to the climate action plan, and we did it for regardless of which time frame they occurred in. So going back to that other milestone that I mentioned, which was where we got direction to staff to work on this energy reach code item and to bring up and direction on the prohibition of natural gas infrastructure in certain types of future development. So those items, they weren't in the work plan to hit this fiscal year for the resource management agency who they were tasked to. So what happened is those things were expedited, moved forward as requested, and made part of this study. And so those things occur, and one of the summary tables is really more of an inventory in this report, and you could look at and find these individual programs and also find others related to them. One of the things related to some of the programs which are not yet initiated is some of them are sequential in nature. And so that means that some programs have to occur before others can begin, or they at least have to get initiated. And that's the case for these programs, COSS and HAS AA. These two are related to about 8 other programs that will continue after these two get started. And the resource management agency is making a good effort and prioritizing the work effort they have on their plate to make sure these can happen in a way that's aligned with direction from the Board of Supervisors. So one of the things too that we highlighted with the board, and I wanted to highlight with this group because what you're doing, you interact with me directly a lot. Sue Hughes comes to these meetings, Alejandro comes to these meetings, but this climate action plan is distributed between a number of different agencies. And I would say this climate action plan is somewhat unique in that it's embedded in a general plan. So it's at a fairly high level from a policy context. It's distributed out through multiple elements of a very broad document, as opposed to a standalone climate action plan, which means it's very cross-cutting, but it's also assigned to a number of different agencies, which is good because that makes it broad, but it also makes it somewhat hard because there's a lot of coordination between those agencies and if you want to make sure it's effective. So what we highlighted here was who the leads are, how program implementation is occurring, and what some additional resources are expected to be tapped as we move forward, and to consult and provide input on certain items when we have key decisions to be made. So the sustainability division has been basically tapped as the lead implementer or coordinator for the climate action plan in an interagency fashion. So each of the agencies still have their own assignments, but they'll be working together, and the sustainability division is going to be directing and managing that. Program implementation, however, because those programs are assigned to individual agencies that have their own budgets, that have their own priorities, that are competing with them, they will be working on those agency to agency. However, we've also created a CAP team, and so that is points of contact with these other key agencies that come from this sustainability committee. And for those not familiar with it, we have an internal sustainability committee that's an interagency working group that are agency directors that work on a lot of issues, some of which now are climate action plan related, but anything from green procurement and fleet issues to the way we do business, anything that touches sustainability. So the sustainability division has been involved with this for some time in the past. The sustainability committee, however, had not met for a period of time. And so we essentially have rebooted it, and we'll be making the climate action plan a key part of the work that it does and make sure that it continues. So one of the first things we did when we rebooted that sustainability committee was we said that we wanted to establish this CAP team, and there was support for that. And so we've gone ahead and done that. And so we have those individuals already identified and starting to get together. And then in addition to that, obviously external consultant services are going to be used to help where needed to make sure we can carry out the work that we've said we're going to do. Now, one of the things I wanted to highlight too is part of the reasoning behind picking the sustainability division. Not everybody knows exactly what we do. It's part of why we want to do a website redesign so we can do a better job of telling people what we do. But I wanted to highlight some of the things that we do and some of the people that are behind it and why the sustainability division was picked to be a lead for this. So from a government standpoint, almost a government affairs, we think of as our staff that are working as Sustainability County of Ventura staff. We do climate action plan implementation. We manage this council. Now we're working with organizing and coordinating the sustainability committee and really other tasks as assigned. So that can be anything that's really tasked to staff. But we also have major initiatives like the Ventura County Regional Energy Alliance that does a whole lot of really interesting work across Ventura County. Their council has representatives from cities, from the county, from special districts, and it does some really interesting work as part of the Green Business Network. It does obviously has a focus on regional collaboration. And if you think of things like the Ventura County Electric Vehicle Ready Blueprint, that's them. So they're working on those sorts of initiatives. And then we have another one that I've seen people that have come to these meetings also at some of their courses and offerings, but we have the Tri-County Regional Energy Network, and that is Ventura County, Santa Barbara County, and SLO County. They have a few different programs, but what they're really doing is elevating energy efficiency, which often translates to GHG reductions through energy conservation, through building performance and those sorts of things. And so they're a really phenomenal resource that we have and that we have staff already assigned to. And so I wanted to take this from a programmatic standpoint and flip it into a people standpoint. And so these are the people that we have standing behind all of those programs. And this is why the sustainability division was selected to act as a lead, because it is really well steeped in things like energy. And so it positions it really well to do this, not to mention it's part of the county executive office, which tends to have a hand in things that are very cross-cutting or that touch multiple agencies. So that was some of the rationale behind the selection for the sustainability moving forward and officially being project manager for CAP implementation. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out with this budget and staffing plan is that, and I have these as supplemental slides that we can look at if your council wants to as part of this presentation, but they're in the report, they're available at any time. So I wasn't going to just throw them up on a slide and say this is a table, but what you'll find in there is that it's an analysis and inventory of all 81 CAP related programs and the way that they're going to be addressed from a resource standpoint for fiscal year 21-22. And then we'll be creating another update to how we allocate resources as we go into the next fiscal year. Analysis is done both by agency department as well as by general plan element. But when you think of general plan element, rather than who's doing the work, you can think of it thematically or kind of by programmatic topic. The costs are summarized as either one-time, ongoing, or total costs. You think one-time, that's often going to be something where you're making a purchase, you're hiring a consultant, a project starts or stops, but ongoing might be something that's an ongoing program or service delivery, might be associated with staff. We also look at funding sources, basically saying, is it general fund or is it coming from somewhere else? In some cases, we know where those funds are expected to come from. In other cases, we're making reasonable assumptions based on the information we have at hand. And then also has anticipated staffing impacts. And there is a implementation program status summary in there. So we go program by program and list what those, what the status of those programs are, which are started up and which have not started up yet, for example. So here's a very high level view. You could find this in the executive summary portion of that report. But the cap related costs are estimated to be, just for this fiscal year, $5.9 million. 50% of those costs are expected to be through the general fund. So the other half is not general fund impact. Of those estimated costs that are general fund, 2.2 million are already allocated and budgeted. However, 717,000 were for new funding allocations. And so when we took this to the Board of Supervisors, we requested that these funds be brought in to fund that outstanding 717,000, and the board did that. So that allocation was already made and went to a couple of different agencies, which I'll highlight in following slides. And then what you'll see in those tables, and if you were to tabulate all of those different programs, is that 44% of programs have already been initiated and 45 or 56% remain uninitiated. Most of those uninitiated are on a couple of different timeframes, which we call out some of those. For example, one of the major timeframes that you see a lot of those occurring in is they're supposed to be implemented somewhere between 2020 and 2025. So we haven't necessarily exceeded the timeframes on those ones yet. All right, so I wanted to give.
Sylvia, may I ask a question at this point?
Yes, go ahead. Councilmember.
Could you go back to the last slide?
Yeah.
Question about what you just talked about. Programs that have already been initiated and those that have not yet. And I noticed in reading through the packet this morning that some of the programs, policies and programs indicate not to be implemented till 2025, which was disappointing to see, considering we have this climate emergency. Can you explain why they're being delayed so much?
They're not being delayed. That was how it was scheduled to occur. So if you were to look in the general plan at the individual programs, there are a few different timeframes for implementation to occur. And one of the major ones is that timeframe that I just mentioned, that 2020 to 2025. But there are two other kind of blocks in those timeframes where it might say 2026 to 2030 or 2030 to 2040. And so those are timeframes that the board already adopted for when these are scheduled to occur. And so it wasn't staff delaying anything, but that is when it's scheduled to occur based on the general plan. And so most of those, that's what we anticipate happening, sticking to the timeframe the board has requested and adopted.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So I wanted to provide a couple of examples. These are the same ones I showed to the Board of Supervisors for examples of things that we're doing already. And part of the reason I wanted to highlight it is not everyone knows or even needs to know everything that government is doing all the time. That's why you hire people to do it, so you don't have to worry about it necessarily, but wanted to highlight some of the stuff that we're already doing and then highlight an example of something that's going to happen in the near future. So we have that Tri-County Regional Energy Network that I mentioned a couple of slides ago that's administered through the Sustainability Division. That's something that's got a status of active and ongoing, and that initiative is already implementing, and it doesn't mean that we won't try and do it even more or make it more effective along the way. But these two programs to improve energy conservation awareness and energy efficiency and conservation programs. So those are examples of things that are already occurring. So if you were to go to 3cren.org, you have some really fantastic resources that are there for workforce development, home energy savings, for local government officials, and for all sorts of folks. And so that initiative is tying directly into some of our climate action plan activities and implementation. For things that aren't implemented yet, but that we hope to see implemented in the future before long. So the status is listed in that report as not implemented, so it hasn't occurred yet. But there's going to be a memorandum of understanding with the UC Cooperative Extension where we're going to get some of these items moving forward in the near future. And so one is specialty farming education. So education and best practices that relates to our climate action plan and has a touch there. And also agriculture related research into the effects of climate change on agriculture is another one. And so those are two that we're actively working on and that'll be fulfilled through this memorandum of understanding with the UC Cooperative Extension. So where we don't have that technical expertise in-house, or we couldn't do it as well as somebody else could, perhaps we're working with a partner here in the area. So we wanted to highlight those. So this is a different way of showing the implementation summary or the implementation statuses. You see this listed by agency or department. This is also a chart that's in the that's in that report. So you could find this there too. But you can see, as Councilmember White noted, there are some of those that say they're not initiated and they're to be implemented after 2025, and those are lists shown here in gray. And there are others that are not initiated, but to be implemented by or before 2025, and those are shown as in orange. But then those other colors, greens and blues, those show those that are either initiated, and when I say initiated, it's typically in some level of a design phase, or it's active and ongoing. So those are what we have for those statuses. And one of the things, because I mentioned the dollar figures from before, as far as those new allocations that we asked about, this and the next slide highlight those in a little bit greater detail. So you can see that there's a number of existing funds associated with what's already in the county's budget for the activities that we have related to climate action plan activities. And so those are on that left hand of those two columns showing these figures. But then there were those that needed new resources to occur in this fiscal year. And those are shown in that rightmost column under new resources. The asterisks that you see there are somewhere the county executive office will be helping those agencies with some portion of that implementation. And so it's shown there. And that'll be clear because we show it by program in the next slide. All right, and so these are the actual programs that we see that are received those new allocations of funding because they were unbudgeted but needed funds to be able to fully do the work that staff is already involved in and looking forward to doing. So we see those, a number of those underneath the Resource Management Agency. Amongst those are the building code update, that's that mandatory energy reach code, as well as has AA down there, the prohibition of natural gas infrastructure in new residential and commercial development. And then two of those are going to be spearheaded by the Sustainability Division, that's COSX and COSC. Those are related to GHG implementation monitoring and then later public reporting, so preparing for that. So those are somewhat related. The Agricultural Commissioner's Office is also receiving support from the County Executive Office, I believe mostly from the finance team, in handling a few of those programs. And the thing I would note is that some of these programs that you see here, part of the reason that they needed additional funds is because they're relatively new activities. We haven't historically had to do them, or we're ramping up the activities associated with them to a greater degree than they existed previously. And then strictly under the County Executive Office, you see improve energy conservation awareness. So some of that has to do with the efforts we want to have a bigger reach when it comes to energy conservation awareness. All right, so some of the next steps that we told the board about: Sustainability Division taking a lead role in coordination of CAP implementation, the agency director engagement. So those are those agency directors that have their own budgets, that have staff, that have that real management and oversight of those programs, but having them collaborate with each other through the sustainability committee and making sure that our CAP implementation is part of that, creating that CAP team, making sure that this report is a bridge into that annual budgeting process, that we're going to, and then through that budgeting process, through that CAP team, there's going to be implementation phasing. So making sure that we understand what the work plan is with each of those agencies and getting those consultant agreements lined up so that we can proceed with that work at a rapid pace. And then going ahead and making sure we do report backs to the board as we're requested to do so. So that's what I've got. I do have, as I mentioned before, some of those supplemental slides after this. And so the public can find this now that the packet's up, but in the agenda packet, you'd see that those supplemental slides are following this. And those are just summary tables from the fiscal year 21-22 budget and staffing plan for CAP implementation. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Clay. Very comprehensive report. Are there any questions from the council or staff? Yes, go ahead, Councilmember White.
Yeah, thank you, Sylvia. Clay, when this went to the board recently, was there any requests made to hire technical consultants to help with implementing the cap?
I don't think there were specific, and I could be wrong, but I don't recall any specific requests, because part of what is in this report is that there are going to be a number of consultants for different programs, but there are 81 different programs. And I would say a lot of them are going to need technical consultants in different places. And those are in the estimates. So the budgeting that's been requested includes budgetary requests to rely on those. So for example, I pointed out, I think it was COSY and COSZ. I could be getting those a little off, but the ones related to the GHG monitoring and reporting. So that's one where we expect that there's going to be technical consultants used for that, because that's not capacity that we have right now in-house. And so there are some of the budgetary allocations that were made were for those sorts of things. And we see those same sorts of things with other programs.
Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Ontiveros.
I have a question about the 3C REN. I checked out their website like you suggested while you were talking, but I was paying attention. And I saw that there were logos for like the city of Santa Maria and the libraries. But are cities part of that too? Or are cities? And I saw that city of Santa Barbara isn't there, but they have a pretty comprehensive energy program out there. That's really amazing. So I'm just wondering how the organizations that belong.
My understanding is that it's primarily administered by the counties, but Alejandra or some of our other staff would be better capable of answering that.
There's Alejandra. It is a tri-county regional effort, so the staff is located within County of San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, and ourselves in Ventura, but the cities are a part of it. The cities do take advantage of the programs that we have, and we collaborate with all 20 some cities in the 3 regions. Yeah, so we the ones that the logos that you see listed are the ones that we have specific programs like the library toolkit, so that we're partnering with them, but every city is part of the 3C REN in the tri-county region.
And may I give a shout out to Mr. Salcedo?
Yes, yeah, so he's great and part of our team.
He came to my house and did an energy efficiency study here. So he does really good work, and I'm just glad you have him on staff.
Thank you.
You know, he's a great example of a fantastic person and resource that we have, and that's exactly the sort of thing. So thank you for mentioning that. That's a good example to share with everyone.
Okay, any other questions or comments from council members? All right, so any questions or comments from the public? You could raise your hand at this time. Take public comments. All right, so seeing none, then we are asked to receive an, I'm sorry, Councilmember Ontiveros.
I'm sorry. I just want to make sure everybody knows that they can get an energy efficient study for their house. I don't think people know that they can do that they can call and say, hey, can I make an appointment? Can you come and do an energy efficiency study for my house? What can I do? And so I think that a lot of us aren't aware. I mean, it took me a long time to access that service. I had to research it. I didn't know it was available. And I just think it's not general information. So I thought about it, oh, wait, not everybody knows about this. And so if we all get that message out there, you know, I mean, obviously you also have to have money to implement what they suggest. I didn't have that, but at least there's somewhere to start and have goals for each of our places where we live. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. So Clay, you want to mention what you just put in the chat?
Oh, so I just put in the chat the link to the website that Councilmember Ontiveros already found, but it's for 3C REN, and I would really echo what the council member had to say, in that it is a really unique program. They have really fantastic offerings. They do have individuals that can do home energy savings checks on your house, which really has to do with how well your building is doing as a house. how much it's doing the stuff that it's supposed to do and how it could do it even better, which should be able to result in your house being more comfortable, your house costing you less to operate it, and it's going to do those things like conserve energy that we want it to do. So it really does align with the sorts of things that we're talking about here, and it's a really impactful way of doing it. And if people, for some reason, don't want to, aren't ready to make the plunge into inviting someone in their house to do that, we do have a really interesting program too, where we have home energy toolkits that you can check out from some of our local libraries. But I have to tell you, it's popular enough that there's a waiting list. But don't let that deter you. It just means you need to go there sooner and put your name on the list.
All right, thank you. Thanks for that valuable information. Any other questions or comments? So I do have a couple of questions, Clay. So one of them is that, do you foresee that each year there will be this kind of budget presentation for the supervisors to then consider possibly adding to being provided general funds in order to implement the program each year?
I think that I don't think it'll look exactly like this, but something like it will be presented as part of the budgetary packages. So other kind of focus areas that we have as part of the budget are also presented to the budget. And since this is part of the general plan and it says we're going to do it, then we're going to do it. But it may look a bit different because it's going to be blended into that budget. But I think it truly makes it powerful because, you know, a budgetary process from a public policy standpoint is really a statement about priorities. And so when you get your climate action plan to be part of that budget, you are prioritizing it. And so I think it is important to note that that's a big milestone for us to have that there. And so it's going to be there. It's going to be called out. It's going to be highlighted. But I don't know exactly what that's going to look like because we haven't done that as part of that greater process yet. But it will be there and it will be highlighted. And
then can you tell me, if it isn't money set aside from the general fund, is it where the different departments or if you all are taking the lead, will you be actively looking at grants and other programs in order to bring in the money necessary?
Yes. So there will be a number of different mechanisms that things can be funded through. For example, for 3C REN, we have been very successful through Alejandra's leadership in getting state funds to pay for that. Primarily, I think from the California Energy Commission is where a big chunk of those for this Tri-County Regional Energy Network have come from. And so that's been really successful as a strategy. I mean, what we're doing and talking about with Climate Action Plan, there are a number of things that came out of the governor's recent budget that seem like they would align. So we're going to be looking for those opportunities and are hopeful we can make some of those work. But additionally, some of these activities might be revenue offset through permitting activities and those sorts of things. So that's an alternative mechanism that we see for some of those. I think there were a couple that come to mind that were related to the Environmental Health Division the county does. So it's not just coming out of the general fund. There's a number of ways that things can be financed. And so those are captured there too. And we try and include those. And that's why we tried to bifurcate the way we talked about costs, saying something's a general fund impact. We want to know where those are. And then if things come from other buckets, those could come from another number of mechanisms. So we just characterize those as not the general fund.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other comments or questions from the council? All right, seeing none. So then we are asked to receive and file. Will there be a motion made for that?
I motion to receive the file.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, thank you. So a motion's been made and seconded. Could we have a roll call, please? Oh, I'm sorry, Clay, I think you're muted.
Thank you. Councilmember White.
Aye.
Councilmember Ferris.
Yes.
Councilmember Schnapp.
Yes.
Councilmember Kessley.
Yes.
Councilmember Ontiveros.
Yes.
Councilmember Garola.
Yes.
Councilmember Hernandez.
Yes.
Thank you. And the other council members are absent.
Okay, wonderful. So this motion passes then unanimously. Let's move on then to item number 14, to receive and file an update from other issues through the temporary advisory committees, tax regarding the 3 focus areas of future work. So it was, oh, sorry, I misread it. It's from the other issues TAC for what they are recommending are the 3 other focus areas. So we've set aside 10 minutes for this item. So let's go ahead and have a presentation. And Clay, you want to kick it off?
Well, I would just say there's, I wasn't provided with slides for a presentation for this one, but the TAC did meet. They sent me correspondence that's been included in the packet related to the topic areas that they would like to, or that they've suggested that they will be working on to start with. And let me just pull it up on my side, and I can go ahead and screen share those if your council would like.
And remind us who is on this particular TAC.
The other issues TAC includes Councilmember White, Councilmember Ramirez, and Councilmember Ontiveros.
Okay.
And here we go. And if either of the council members, Ontiveros or White, would like to say anything about this, I don't know a whole lot about what you all spoke about, so you're welcome to fill in the blanks.
It's not robust. It's just, we just met once. We wanted to just get together to get to know each other, talk about what we want to talk about. And I mean, that took a whole hour because we were just trying to figure out what each other's viewpoints are and how we can work together. And so then we said, okay, let's work on stationary sources. Let's work on building energy and solid waste. And so we just kind of developed that. And then we didn't really need 10 minutes today. We just really, we should have said that. We just wanted to create just a short, sweet, hey, these are the things we're going to work on. And then after the holiday, we have another meeting scheduled. And that's when I think we'll really roll up our sleeves to work. I don't know if Councilmember White would like to comment further.
Thank you, Councilmember Ontiveros. Councilmember White, do you want to add to the comments?
I think Dina pretty much covered it. These are the areas that we intend to research for proposed policies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, stationary sources, buildings, and solid waste. We don't have anything specific right now, but we will.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so are there any comments or questions from other council members? So go ahead, Councilmember Kesley.
So quick question for the members of the other issues TAC. I noticed that one of them is there's 2 items on there, building energy and solid waste. If another council member has a level of experience with the ways that properties, buildings are looking at being more energy efficient, and if there are issues where we're looking at how to manage solid waste, how would I maybe get information to you that I have readily accessible to me, because I'm right in the middle of doing those types of things?
Oh, email us.
Okay.
That's fine. I think we're all sharing emails, right? The county emails. And is that the purpose of it, right, Clay? Maybe?
Yes, everyone's been assigned county emails, and I haven't brought that up on this time, but I've been emailing out with everyone so far on their personal and county, because I'm not sure what everyone's level of comfort is yet for just switching to just using one, like the county email, for example. But we can certainly do that. And the one thing I would make sure is that when things are shared, we just want to make sure that we're not endangering the council of doing a serial meeting through having things go from one to another to another. So I would say that if, for example, it's going from Councilmember Kesley to this TAC, that's still going from 1 to 3 members. It's less than a quorum. It is perfectly okay, but we cannot continue to forward that on to other folks. And if any of the council members don't have or aren't sure they have the right email address for any of the other council members, then just let me know and I can provide you with that or forward it along.
May I make a suggestion? That maybe that email be sent to everybody, so at least everybody knows, and then just put on the subject heading for this specific TAC. And then that way the TAC knows that it's for them, but then everybody has access to that information.
I think that would be fine as long as it's not being requested that we take some kind of action with that's specific. So that would be enacted kind of a public meeting type issue. The other thing I would say is, now the point of what we're doing with the county emails is we're trying to get everyone off of the personal emails. And so I can send those out. I haven't done kind of a quality check with everyone yet on seeing if you've made the jump to using or relying on the county email yet, but I would like to start doing that sooner rather than later if possible.
Okay, thank you. So let's see, we have Councilmember White. Go ahead.
Just a thought about how Maggie might have some ideas on some of the things we're working on the other issues TAC. Could she not bring them forward during one of these meetings of the entire committee and thereby avoid any Brown Act issues?
Absolutely. And any council member is welcome to share something specifically for a meeting rather than forwarding it to the group. That's fine too. So if a council member simply wants to bring something up as a discussion topic, as something that's, that's pertains to the work that you all are doing, we can do that. And so we can have that shared to the entire council. That would be perfectly acceptable.
Okay, Councilmember Kesley.
And then one final question is that, now that the evaluations TAC has kind of completed its goal, what happens with Councilmember Ferris and I? Do we roll on to another TAC? What is the process of that?
So typically we would dissolve the TAC or a TAC if it's prepared to do so, and then you could form a new one or move into one or take no action. So that would just kind of hold steady until another one's formed. So we don't have anything in the books now. I think that speaking since this was the first time that we'd had anything come from one of the TACs and come in, I didn't know if you were going to be asked to continue working on it further or not. Everyone seemed to like it okay, so that's good. But we can make that part of the agenda at a future meeting if we would like to dissolve the evaluation criteria TAC, and then you can take an action to modify taxes as you want at that time too. We'll just agendize it.
Good question.
Excuse
yes,
me.
Go ahead, Sue.
Thank you. I'm sorry for interrupting. As I listened to the conversation about email addresses, I had a conversation with County Council. And so I'm going to request that from this moment forward, we no longer use personal email addresses and we only use the @ventura.org addresses for doing the business of the VCCEC.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other comments or questions for these other issues TAC? I like the fact that you all have come up with the stationary sources, building energy, and solid waste. Those seem like pretty good topics to focus in on. I appreciate you honing down to these three. So I don't see any other hands. Thanks, Phil. Don't see any other hands up. So at this time, I'll ask if there are any public comments to be made at this point for this item. And you could take yourself off of mute or raise your hand. All right, so seeing none then, we are asked to receive and file this update. So is there a motion?
Motion to receive report.
Okay,
And file.
Councilmember Ferris, and is there a
I'll
second?
second that.
Okay, Councilmember Kesley seconds. So We have a motion then. Clay, would you like to take roll call?
All right. Councilmember White,
Yes.
Councilmember Ferris,
Yes.
Chair Schnapp,
Yes.
Councilmember Kessley,
Yes.
Councilmember Ontiveros,
Yes.
Councilmember Garola,
Yes.
Councilmember Hernandez,
Yes.
and the other 3 council members are absent.
Great, okay, so motion passes unanimously. All right, so let's move on to item number 15. And this is where council members have opportunity to make comments and or request future agenda items and talk about any updates. So are there any council members who wish to do so? So I have Councilmember Hernandez, go ahead.
Yes, I would, I've been looking at some documentaries, and one of them is Kiss the Ground. One is Living Soil. The third one is Eating Animals, and the fourth and last one is Cowspiracy. And they're excellent documentaries, and really, I need to watch all of them again. I've learned so much by them. And I would like to see some information on the animal agriculture and how that has impacted global warming, because what I've seen on these 4 documentaries was eye-opening, and I would suggest that all of us would look at those at some time very soon. And I don't know if right now would be the time to put that on the agenda for upcoming meetings, to have a conversation about that. I'm not sure what the process is right now, but I would like to have a conversation about it.
So we can make that as part of an upcoming agenda.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, suggestions? Discussion? Yes, go ahead, Councilmember White.
Yes, Clay, and you previously asked whether any of the council members had suggestions for speakers to come to our council meetings. And I followed up, this is a month and a half ago probably, with recommending that the council hear from Amy Ryder, who is with the Decarbonization Coalition, who are primarily concerned with reducing greenhouse gas emissions from buildings. And I know that you at least initially communicated with her. Is there any update on when we might be able to hear from her?
Yeah, so tentatively I've spoken with her, and she has agreed to do a guest presentation in December. Right now, she would be the only thing on the agenda that we have for that, unless we're able to get things together for example, Councilmember Hernandez's request. But yeah, so that I have been speaking with her. And so tentatively right now, I'm planning on having her as a guest speaker, as long as your council still plans to meet. My only concern was I wanted to make sure that the council still wanted to meet, given that it's relatively close to the holidays.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments from council members? The future agenda items? Yes, Councilmember Hernandez.
Would we be able to move the meeting earlier, so it's not as close to Christmas for December?
I think the only issue that we had is earlier, we have board meetings on those Tuesdays. So that's the reason what we have it that Tuesday. It's the Tuesday that there is no board board meeting. I think we're just running until the end of the year and holiday time and
Oh,
running
okay.
out of time.
Okay. One item I had is just that is to find out whether or not this council wanted to hold a meeting December the 21st. And if we decide not to do that, then the next meeting would be January 18th for this council. So wanted to identify what this group would like to do. Any
I
suggestions?
had another question.
Oh, go ahead. So Councilmember Hernandez and then Councilmember Ontiveros.
So, so we don't lose ground and lose a meeting. And I would actually like to skip the December meeting, but is it possible to have 2 meetings in January, one in the early, maybe in the first week of January, and then this normal one for later?
So that would be your recommendation.
For the 2, yes.
Councilmember Ontiveros.
I like the idea of having the speaker in December. That way, if folks can't make it to the December meeting, at least those who want to hear the speaker, we don't have to make substantive decisions in December that will affect others who can't come. And there'll be a recording of it too.
It would be recorded. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yes,
Another one.
Councilmember White.
I agree with Dina. I think even if we don't have a voting kind of meeting, just to keep going here, addressing the emergency and getting more information would be good.
Okay. And then Councilmember Hernandez, go ahead.
Yes, if we're still going to have a meeting in December, then I would prefer for the agenda item that I have suggested for the animal agriculture be in January and not in the December meeting.
Okay. And any other comments here from any other council members? All right, so I'm kind of hearing that we proceed forward with having our next meeting on December the 21st. And then the following meeting would be January 18th. Okay, so as long as we would have a quorum then to meet on the 21st, I think that would be okay. All right, so anything else for the agenda item number 15 from the council? Okay, seeing none, then staff, Clay, are you okay with that?
Yep, staff is available.
Okay, super. So then let's go ahead and adjourn this meeting. We will meet then on December 21st via Zoom, and we'll have a guest speaker and we'll formulate that agenda. In the meantime, I know Clay had referred to making sure that the full agenda packet was now linked and available to everybody. And have a great Thanksgiving, everyone. We'll see you then in December. Bye.
Yes, have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Happy
Thank you.
Thanksgiving.
Holiday,
Happy
Thanksgiving.
holidays.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Good job, Sylvia.